Hi, I'm Kate Danley and welcome to the Kate Cast. My guest today is Joshua Zehner. He was one of the creators of Kooza for Cirque du Soleil. He was also the very last graduate of the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Clown College. He toured with Ringling Brothers for over 2 years. He performed with the amazing Jonathan, and he's got some pretty amazing stories himself. So sit back, relax, and meet Joshua Zehner.
Who am I gonna talk to today? What will I ask them and what will they say? What will they say? What will they say?
Hi, I'm Kate Danley and welcome to the Kate Cast. I am here with actor, director, and professional clown, Joshua Zehner. Thanks so much for coming in, Josh.
Thank you for having me.
Were you always the class clown growing up?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I was, like when I was really little, I pretty much had no friends.
Okay.
And I'm smiling while I say this. It's like terribly sad and painful sometimes to think about. But like when I was really little, I was like the nerd.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I found solace like hiding in the work, you know? As I got older, the other thing that happened too is, so I got good at the work and I was bored.
Okay.
And so then boredom led to mischief. And then once kids started laughing, then I was like, oh, cool.
Did you have a happy childhood?
Yeah, I had a happy childhood.
Yeah.
I was a child of divorce, as everybody is. But my parents were both concerned about my brothers and I's happiness. So my brothers and I use sarcasm a lot to communicate. Our whole family does. So it's like, it's a little draining. Like after like a Christmas dinner, you're just like, oh, because everyone's like, you know, can you pass the potatoes? Oh, you want potatoes? It's like, but I don't know. We're all very passionate people, so it gets loud and it gets, yeah. And my grandparents, like, they were like a huge influence on my life.
Yeah.
Their whole thing was they wanted us to experience things, and I never realized how important that was till I got older. And then I realized, like, I don't know, so much of my life I can thank them for.
Yeah. What were some of the things that they helped you to experience?
So my grandparents grew up really poor in Wisconsin, and especially my grandfather was like really poor. And like he remembers the first night he took my grandma on a date, and he went to a nice restaurant, and he was like so nervous, he didn't know how to act, he didn't know how to eat at this nice restaurant. So like he was like, I'm gonna make sure you kids know how to eat in a nice restaurant. So he like took us to nice restaurants. He knew that it wasn't like the things you get in life, like the treasures and stuff like that, it's the experiences you have. I remember one time he took us, my two brothers and I, camping, and I was like, oh, this will be fun. Like, we just thought we're going camping. But then what we didn't know is he had planned every day he took us to, like, SeaWorld, and the next day the Wild Animal Park, then the next day the zoo, and the next day. So it's like, he did things like that, and now those are, like, the most important things to me. Like, I could care less about any of my belongings getting trashed. Like, I'll always have these memories, and I realized, like, oh, that's what this is all about.
You know, were your mom and dad in the arts?
No.
No?
No. If there was anybody in the... Okay, so my grandmother is Polish, like very Polish.
Okay.
And she like did like... she did like the Polish dancing and stuff. And my... her brothers were all in a big polka band. And they were actually sponsored by like Pabst Blue Ribbon in Wisconsin. Like they were the Pabst polka band. Like this is like so Polish. But like... And they were all into like performing and stuff like that. So if there was any kind of like performance, it came from my grandmother. And then the crazy thing is, after I was on the circus on Ringling Brothers, my grandmother brought me this article, and it was her great aunt. And it turns out my like great grandfather was a clown, and my great aunt was like one of the biggest daredevils in like the really old circus, the Ringling. And like and like there was an article about how she like traveled like all over the world by camel and by elephant and by car and by steamship and blah blah blah. And now she's gonna be one of the first people to fly on the Zeppelin. When you're on the circus too, there's a difference in how people treat you once they know you have circus blood. Which is like, I didn't know any of this till I got in. But like, it was cool because like the older circus families that were part of the show already, they were like cool to me, but I was just some young dumb clown when I was first there. But then when they found out I had circus blood, they're like, oh,
Coming home.
Yeah. come over here, and then there's like a secret cave. This is where we get to hang out.
When did you first become interested in performing or the circus?
When I was really little, I liked to perform around the house. Like, I used to love to imitate tap dancing, but particularly Bugs Bunny style. Yeah, so I thought that was just so funny. Once I hit about junior high, I started running for like student council and stuff. Everything I do, I like to do it. I like to really like know it. Like I like to be part of the heritage. So I remember when I got elected to, I became the school president in the junior high. I was reading like the responsibilities, and one of the responsibilities was of the president was to host the assemblies, and I was like, oh, then I must host them. And like before it was just like, oh, who wants to do it? But I was like, no. It says here on paper, I'm supposed to. So whether you want to or not, it doesn't matter. What I found was because we didn't have like a theater program, I was using student council as a chance to perform. Basically, every assembly we have, and this kind of went into high school too, was the Josh Zehner show. And it was like, yeah, we got a pep rally coming, but first, you got a monologue from me. And to the point where when I was in high school, I ran for commissioner of assemblies, just so I could do this. And I themed one of our whole assemblies, like late night at El Dorado in my high school. And so, like, I had this backdrop made, I had a desk, and, like, people, like, the cheerleaders would come out perform, and then if I liked them, why don't you girls come on up? And I interview them for a couple minutes and stuff. It was so lame. But I loved it. And everybody's I talked to afterwards was like, man, those assemblies, Josh, were awesome. Like, but it's just because that is what I cared about. I was bored in school. I was good at school, and I was bored. I was a kid I'd run in right before a test. I'd open my book and just go like, alright, let's do this. And I'd like ace the test. I was so bored with that's where I that helped keep me under control. It's the creative stuff.
When did you make that transition into deciding this was something you wanted to do with your life?
So I was doing student council. I was really involved with the theater program.
Okay.
And we actually I was lucky. I grew up in Orange County, and we had the LA Comedy Sports team does a high school league.
Oh.
And our high school was part of it. And, that was one of the best things that could happen to me. Just because they treated you like professionals. They trained you like professionals. And they're like, hey, you guys are young adults, act like adults. And so, people rise to the occasion. I was really enjoying it, but I still didn't think I could do that for a living. I was also doing mock trial.
Okay.
And I was one of the only people to be an attorney all 4 years. You went into the real courthouses in Santa Monica, and you'd perform in front of real judges, and you present these cases. So it was the Joshua Zehner show. I was like, and can you honestly believe that this man, with no evidence, I was just going crazy. An objection, Your Honor, hearsay, and blah, blah. It was so cool. So I was like, I'm going to be an attorney. The judges there, they got to know me because I did it for 4 years. Finally, there was an attorney, a judge who spoke to me afterwards, and she was like, look, if you promise to come and work for the state for 5 years minimum, I'll help you. I have some judges and some attorneys who will help you go to school, will help you get in any school you want, and will help you with your schooling, including paying for it. But you have to work for the state, and I was like, okay. But my thing was I hated the research. I hate that research, and that's most of the job. And I said, I hate the research. I just like to put on the trial. And she said, that's why we want you. You're a good trial attorney. We'll have the people do the research, and you'll present it. And so I was like, okay. And I was talking about, and in my head, that's all I was daydreaming about. I was like, I'm going to be an attorney, and I'm going to have this nice car, and, all this kind of stuff. And a third of the way into my senior year, I got this letter from Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Clown College. And it said, hey, we want you to audition. And there's, clowns all over the envelope. And you open it, it's, really colorful. And I was like, and I thought this was one of my friends, screwing with me. Because I didn't like the circus. Not that I didn't like it. I just never thought of the circus. And I did think clowns were dumb. And so I was like, So I thought this was a joke, so I kind of threw it out. But then another letter came. And I was like, oh, maybe this is real. So I called the number and stuff. And I found, oh, this is real. Oh, wow. And so I talked to my grandfather about it. And I was like, what do you think I should do? And stuff like that. He said, do it. Because he's like, law school will be waiting. And also, if I got into the clown college, it would just be during the summer. Because the way that clown college works is like the first part of clown college is you go for like the summer and you train with them. And then the next part of your training is your first year on the road. And so my grandmother was like, just go, because it's your summer. It's an experience that you'll never, like, very few people get to have. And you'll always look back and go, oh, I should have done it. And he's like, you never want to have that feeling. And so I was like, all right, I'll do it. So I auditioned, and I got in. And it's funny, because when I went, I was 18 years old. Like, I literally had graduated high school, and I think, like, 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Florida. It was my first time, like, going away and being away from my parents and stuff like that. I was, like, the guy who ended up being, like, one of my close friends, he was also just graduating high school. But the rest of the people were older. And because most people use it as kind of like a graduate program. Okay. So they would study theater, and then they decide, like, oh, I really want to learn physical comedy. And so then they'd apply to get into the clown college to specialize. So, like, most people were older. So they thought we were idiots. And to this day, like, because the clown college closed after I graduated. I'm the last graduate. Like, Zehner, boom. And they handed me my diploma. And then, like, a couple weeks later, they announced no more clown college. So I will always be the second youngest graduate of the school. And so that means everybody else will always think of we're the two young idiots. And that's how they kind of treat us to this day. Like, I'm like, I've grown. I'm 33 now, you know. Like, and they're like, oh, you guys just never get it. And we're like, what? Like, but I can't blame them. You know, I'll be 80 and I'll be like one of those, like, old little rascals or whatever, and they're like, oh, remember me? And I was like,
well, what was clown college like?
We all drove in a little car. No, it was awesome. Like, it was not what I expected in every good way. Like, I thought clowns were like birthday parties and, you know, and stuff like that. But clowning is not that. And clowning isn't about the makeup and stuff like that. Like, once they showed me, they're like, Laurel and Hardy, Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, these guys are clowns. And this is what you're going to study. Now, of course, when you perform it on the circus, they're going to expect you to wear the makeup and the costumes and stuff like that. But it was awesome because it was everything that I liked about comedy. And the best part was, like, it's such an old school, but, like, it's the way to learn an art. Like, that's my biggest gripe about this town. Yeah. Well, my biggest gripe about entertainment as a whole. Right. Is, like, they forgot that this is art. And art traditionally was learned by being apprenticed to a master and by doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. Was it George Burns who said something like, there's nowhere for kids to be bad these days or something like that? Yeah. And it's so true. Like, people before, like, the golden age of television is the golden age of television because everybody who made it onto television at that time had done thousands of shows. And so they knew how to work an audience. And, like, it's on my website, it's on my resume and stuff like that. Like, I have performed over 10,000 live performances. That, to me, like, that's such an important number to me. And I tout that because you can't buy that. You have to earn it. You have to give up Christmases with your family. You have to give up every holiday with your family. You have to live on a circus train in a room that's 5 feet by 7 feet. You have to go live in places that you don't know anybody. But at the end of it, it's like you learn more than you possibly ever can, like, in a couple years of schooling, you know? Yeah. The whole foundation of my whole career in entertainment, as long as I'm in it, could end tomorrow. But as long as I'm in entertainment, the foundation of my whole career will always be my high school theater program and my time with Ringling Brothers.
How do you learn how to prepare a character or to build a character?
The character thing was interesting. There's three major types of clowns. The first clown was the white-faced clown. Okay. And they're the really pretty ones with, like, they might have, like, one black swirl, and then they wear these, like, ornate costumes. And so in the original circuses, there was just that. And the clown back then was kind of like a stand-up comedian. It would, like, be a smartass and, like, comment on stuff and make fun of performers and stuff like that. But, like, also, like, kind of was the ringmaster. And it came from the Commedia dell'arte, the Pierrot character. And so that's where the ornateness and stuff like that. So it was like a very big honor, and it was like you were like a really high artist in Europe if you were one of these clowns. Then, nobody knows when it actually happened, but the second character came along called the August. And August means stupid in German. And the August was a character based on a country bumpkin. And he was drunk, and so he has the red nose. And so this character came along who would fall, you know, and so then you had the smart guy, dumb guy relationship with the white face and the August. Then, when clowning like started to spread, there started to be this third kind of clown called, they just kind of call it character because it's not quite one or the other. And the Americas give us the third, like the very biggest type of character clown, which is the tramp clown.
Okay.
And so when I was in clown college, everybody was whiteface or an August. But the stuff I was writing, like I was writing everything I had, everything I wrote was like, it'd be funny, but it would come from like a sad place, or like I would write something that like I knew, like, I tell this to my students now, I was like, if you want to get good laughs, and if you want an interesting show, you have to think about the duality of emotion, and you have to think about, I always liken it to pulling back a bow.
Yeah.
So it's like, if I want something to be really funny, if I take the audience down, 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 and then release the laugh, the funny doesn't start here, it starts down here, and so your funny's double the funny. So everything I was writing in clown college was from that viewpoint. I couldn't articulate it at the time, but that's what I was writing. And so they set you down. There was a day, like a few weeks into clown college, they got to know you and they got to see you. And so then there was the big day where they sat each of us down and they showed you like the character sketch of what they thought for your costume, and they talked to you about what the place that they saw for you in the world of clowning. And so they did everybody else, and everybody's like, I'm a white face, I'm an August, I'm a white face, I'm an August. So then they came to Zehner, and so they bring me in, and they said, okay, the dean of the clown college looked at me, he's like, you are so weird, we didn't know what to do. And he's like, I had in my mind a drawing, and an idea who you were going to be. And he said, but I'm not going to show you this drawing. He's like, you don't need to see that drawing, because I think it'll influence you, and you don't need it. So he said, I'm going to show you what we kind of decided you should be. And he flipped over the thing, and it was a tramp clown. And they hadn't had one in Ringling Brothers for like 20 years because the owner of the show was like, I don't need to see some like homeless guy walking around. And so it kind of doomed me a little getting this character because I didn't get a contract my first year. And they even said, yes, this is who you are, but you might not get hired. And I was like, well, then can I be one of those other ones? And they're like, no, because this is who you are, Josh. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so it took me a year to get hired because there was one guy on the road who was kind of like a downer, basically, his character, and he left. And so they're like, okay, we got one spot for this kind of guy. So then I got in, and then quickly, like, over the 2 years I was with Ringling, first I realized, like, I'm too young to play this role. I said, I will come back to this role when I'm older. I need life experience. Yeah. So I was mature enough to realize that. I always tell my brothers and sisters, I'm like, I know how to do makeup really well, I'm good at costumes. Like, what path did I go down? Like, this isn't, I'm supposed to be a lawyer.
What was an average day like there at Clown College?
It was like any performance school. Like, you start in the morning, like, I remember we'd have like stretching and we'd do like warm-ups and stuff like that, and then you learned everything. You learned some acrobatics, you learned skills, which I don't have any of. Everyone's like, hey, juggle, and I'm like, don't juggle. I don't juggle. But to make me feel better, one of my teachers, he pulled me aside, and he didn't really juggle either. But he was really funny, and he was one of the teachers that everyone looked up to, like, in the funny department, and he pulled me aside, and he's like, Josh, just so you know, every time you throw something up, you lose a little bit of funny. And I was like, all right. He's like, see that teacher over there? Great at juggling. Not funny. And I was like, all right, good. That made me feel better. Yeah, we learned everything you would expect. We learned pie throwing. I mean, I hate like the stereotypes and stuff like that, but then we also did do that stuff.
So what did you do after Clown College?
Well, I went home and I started taking college classes because I was like, all right, I don't know if this is going to happen, so I'm going to start doing that lawyer thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, first I got to get all this GE out of the way. And I was like, ugh. So I started taking classes, but then, like, I would find myself, like, going, like, driving to the college and then being like, this is a beautiful day. There's a lot of birds in the park who need to be fed. And I would go to the grocery store and get, like, a loaf of bread and then go feed the bird. Like, literally that's what I was doing. I would, like, I just couldn't handle it. And I just knew that wasn't the path, at least not yet. That wasn't where I was supposed to head. So I had, like, this 9-month, like, thing where I was, like, trying to find myself and blah, blah, blah. But then the circus called, and I'm like, all right, let's do this. So I hopped on the train, and then I was there for 2 years. So it wasn't a long period after clown college, but then pretty much once I got hired by the circus, that kind of started this path that was like, it chugged along as fast and as strong as the circus train itself. Because I went from there, and then I went to Las Vegas, and then while I was in Las Vegas, I did all this stuff, and then I got hired by Cirque du Soleil, which I'm like one of the few people hired to leave Vegas for Cirque du Soleil.
Wow.
Because most people come to Vegas to work for Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah.
Those 9 months were like my preparation, like, and just the fuse was going, and then as soon as they called to put me on the train, boom, like the cannon shot.
Yeah. What was your favorite memory of being in Ringling Brothers?
I got to do big, amazing things. Like, I performed in like every major city in the United States, except for New Orleans. That kills me we didn't go there for my 2 years. But every major city, you can talk to me about it, and I've been there. I got to, perform at Madison Square Garden. I got to do all these like amazing things. But the best memories I have are the tiny ones. Like when on a train run, when we would go to the next town, like, it's not like Amtrak where it's like, there's all these rules and stuff and safety. So, like, we have, like, these Dutch doors kind of in between each train on the vestibule. So you open the top half and just sit there and watch the world go by. And you're going through country that no cars go through, this will be, like, the tracks are the one part of human beings going through, like, these forests and these hills and stuff like that. And so it's beautiful. Like, you'll see animals just, like, caribou or whatever, like, knocking heads, and you're just like, wow. Probably my favorite memory then would be, there was a train run where the band, because the band car was next to the clown car, because we were just kind of big ruckusy group, and so the band set up in the vestibule, like, the drummer had, like, a mini drum kit. And so he set up his mini drum kit, like a little jazz kit. The horn players all came out, and we opened up all the doors, and we had a big kitchen stuff. We made all this food. And they just played live jazz while we watched the world go by. And that was like, I'll never forget that. That was like so cool. It was so amazing. And at that age, like, it was such a hard life. Like, and it was even harder before for all the older clowns. Yeah, I know. Yeah. They had to push the train. But no, it was a hard life. But I wouldn't have traded it for anything. Again, it's about experiences, right?
What was your best show?
Just because it's easy to remember, there was a show where, at Madison Square Garden, I got to do, like, traditionally, the acts were, you had 18 clowns. So the clowns had 2 major spots in the show, and then little spots throughout the show. But those 2 major spots, you didn't really want to leave people out. So each act was like this, like, tour de force of, like, 18 people, like the Dumbo, the firehouse scene. Like, everybody's running around. But the thing is, like, with that kind of, and, like, here's, like, the writer in me starting to come out. Like, with that much going on, it's hard to focus. It's hard to truly get laughs. Because laughs aren't made that way. It's not just like, You need to lead the audience through a story, and 18 people can't do that. So the point is, I got lucky that I was made part of an act that only had 3 people in it.
Okay.
And we inherited this act from one of my really good friends who was on the show with me my first year. He created the act. We got a standing ovation at the end of it. So to get a standing ovation in a sold-out Madison Square Garden, like, one of the things they always tout is, like, the last seat of the house is a quarter mile away. So that's how big this place is. And so to get a standing ovation in Madison Square Garden was, like, very memorable, and yeah. I don't know if it was my best performance, but when you do hundreds, that's part of the joy of doing hundreds. You don't know.
What was the worst performance?
Worst performance? See, I never have worse where like I dread it. I just, when things go wrong, I like to laugh at myself. And so the best was like one of my first few shows. There's a couple. So the Ringmaster, our show was the Sideshow tour, my first year. And so it was like a salute to the old Sideshow. So it was really cool because like I'm like an old-fashioned guy. Like I love old stuff. And so it was so cool that the years I was on Ringling were like a salute to the old stuff. And so the first year I was on was the salute to the Sideshow, and then the second show I was on was like the salute to the old school Americana circus. And so the first year opened with this big display where there were these sideshow acts all over the truck. And they were spread out. And the ringmaster, he's a singing ringmaster, he'd come, he'd sing, and he'd introduce each act. The act would happen. Well, my act was this guy, it was kind of boring. He walked on swords. And so this clown who I worked with, her and I, were there. And then he'd come over to our little float, and we'd have to, like, present the guy and then act nervous when he walked on the swords and stuff like that. But, like, my first few shows, like, I wore, like, a long trench coat. I turned, and it got caught on the lights. And so then, as the ringmaster's coming over, I'm like, and I'm trying to, like, pull it out. And then it's starting to burn because the lights are hot. And so I'm smelling like smoke. And then, like, the front row people are, like, laughing. They're like, this idiot. Like, it wasn't about being clown. Now it's just this idiot was, like, caught. So the ringmaster comes over, and he's totally into it. And then he sees me, and he just starts laughing, like, on the mic. And, like, the audience is like, the people who can't see are like, what's going on? And, like, it was a horrible thing. And then another time, the show ended with, the last thing you saw was like this huge parade, everything happened, the elephants were out and everything. Then everybody leaves, and then the clowns are the last people. They run to the back curtain with the ringmaster. We're waving goodbye as the curtain closes. So we come running, and this is what the audience sees one night. They see all the clowns running, and I'm like one of the last clowns because I'm coming from way back. I somehow fall out of my shoes, like, so I fall and just slide, like, on my face, and my shoes are both back there like this. I'm like, how do I get out of my shoes? But I fall, the clowns are waving goodbye, they see one clown, eat it, slide, I slide, like, right up to where the curtain's closing, but it closes right in front of me. And so I'm like, like, on the ground, curtains close, all the clowns are waving, and so the last thing I see is a clown just on the ground, hurt, with his shoes behind him, and then they're like, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for... And I was just like... So then, of course, I, like, hobble over, grab my shoes, and I go through the curtain, and everybody's just dying laughing. And I was, like, the new guy, so, of course, like, it was mortifying, because I was just like, I wish I could replicate falling out of my shoes like that. Like, it's a great bit.
What did you do after?
That's when I moved to Las Vegas.
Okay.
A really good friend of mine got hired to do, like, a juggling comedy act at Excalibur. Okay. So they have a little stage, and they would have, like, I don't think the stage is there anymore, but they would have, like, 10 different acts. And so throughout the day, they were just looping these acts, and then when they weren't on stage, they were, like, walking around and roaming entertainment, stuff like that. And this was, like, before the economy fell out. So everybody was doing... There was a lot of money in Vegas, so there were a lot of performers. So then he was living there, and he's like, Josh, you got to come out here. It's a great time. And I thought, what the heck? So I luckily applied and got a position at Circus.
Okay.
Now, they had a group of, like, when I first joined, I think there were 5, and they were all ex-Ringling clowns. And so it was kind of like, and they were all older, so, like, a lot of people joke that it was like a retirement home. Like, but I wanted to perform there, and so I was like, oh, let me in, blah, 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 blah. I bugged them a lot, and then they're fine. And so I went there and worked there. There was this little stage, and, like, we would have to, like, drum up business for our show and stuff. When I read Steve Martin's book, and about how he worked at Knott's Berry Farm, I was like, I know what you were talking about. Yeah. So that was what I did right after.
Okay.
And I was there for about a year. My friend ended up lasting about 6 months, and then he left. So he got me to move there, and then he left. And I was like, what, where are you going? So then I was there, and other than the guys I worked with, who were all older and stuff, I had no friends. My life kind of has these, like, little reoccurring things. And loneliness seems to be a part of it. But it's very good. I was alone for about a year. And like when I went to do taxes that year, I looked and I had like 54 ticket stubs. 54 movies I saw by myself. And then I decided, like, okay, this is done, being alone. I still got this gig, and it paid well. Oh, 9/11 happened.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 9/11 happened. Horrible for the country, but it turned out to be really good for business in Las Vegas.
Really?
Well, because nobody was flying out of the country. We were all afraid to leave the country.
Right.
So where did you go for your vacation? You went to our playground in the backyard. So everybody in the U.S. was flying to Vegas. So I don't know if you remember, but like every TV show was set in Vegas. Like half of E's entertainment was like, the blah blah blahs of Vegas, the blah blah blahs of Vegas, the restaurants of Vegas, how to win at black. Like everything was about Vegas. I lucked out. It was like, it probably, as far as like just the history of Vegas, it probably was the second big boom after like the Sinatra years. It was a great time to be young and in Vegas and be a performer. So I was doing that. Then I decided, like, okay, I need to do something. So I was like, maybe I'll start taking some college classes during the day. So I picked like psychology and like some other class. And then the Second City was in Las Vegas.
Oh,
and they had a show at the Flamingo.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, I should, they also had a school. So I was like, I'll take classes so I can meet people. And so I started taking classes, and then they announced, hey, we're going to do this show. We have our main stage cast, and now we're going to have a secondary cast, and we're going to do a show called The Second City Scriptless. And it'll be an entirely improvised show. And so I was like, all right. So I auditioned. Now, everybody in the improv community there had already known each other for a few years.
Right.
And I was this new guy. They just barely got to know me taking classes, and then I did the audition, and I got hired. And so at first everyone was like, who is this guy? But I was like, I have experience. Just because I don't have experience with you guys, I have experience. Like, don't worry. So I was in the cast, and it was awesome. Like, it was great. Like, well, let me tell you the other things, and then I'm going to come back and tell you like what my day was like in Vegas. So I was doing the job at Circus, and then I got hired onto this cast, and I loved it. I loved every time I got to go to the Flamingo. I loved walking through that hotel with my costume, or my costume, pants and tie and stuff like that. But I loved that. I loved going to my dressing room. I loved being part of the cast. I just loved it. I loved my time at the Second City. They asked me to be an instructor, so I was teaching at the school. I loved that. Then, when you went out at night after your shows, because it's a 24-hour town, you can get anything and everything you wanted. And the people who were up at that time were usually other performers. So, like, naturally, you started to hang out with other performers. Now, Las Vegas was awesome because here in LA, if you go to a party and you meet someone, they introduce you themselves with their resume.
Yes.
And you're like, wow, cool, I didn't even ask. And I just want to know who you are. I don't care what you want to be. But everybody interested. When you're in Vegas, everyone is so confident because if they're in Vegas, they've got a gig. You don't go to Vegas to hope to make it big. There's no auditions and stuff. You get auditioned in other cities and get brought into Vegas. So everybody's just relaxed. I love that. Like, every performer you met, you would just be like, hey, blah, blah, so what show are you with? I'm with this one. I'm with this one. Cool. Yeah. And then that's all we talked about. Like, that's as much as we talked about, like, performance. And the rest was getting to know people as people. So I lucked out, and in my class at the Second City, for fun, was the woman who plays the psychic Tanya with Amazing Jonathan.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Penny Wiggins. And her and I ended up being really good friends. And then I started hanging out with Jonathan, and I started kind of hanging out with that crew at night. And then there was one week where Penny had to go away to a wedding. Okay. And so they were trying to find a psychic Tanya to fill in for the show. I hit it off with Jonathan so well because his act is so old school. I mean, it's like, it feels like it's like a modernized vaudeville act, you know? Yeah. And so we just love the same kind of stuff. We would show each other old movies. We'd show each other old stuff. The jokes we laughed at, the pranks we did, it was all the same kind of stuff. He was like, in a lot of ways, he was like a big brother. In a lot of ways, he was like maybe like a dad kind of in comedy for me. So he was just, it meant a lot to me to work with him and to be friends with them. Well, Penny had to go away for a week to go to a wedding. And so they were trying to find a psychic Tanya to fill in, but it's like, comedy, you can't teach someone timing. You can't. And so the girls in town who are available are usually like dancers and stuff, and they're like really pretty, but they're not
Yeah.
The funniest. So then Penny jokingly said, like, oh, too bad Josh couldn't fill in for me, you know? But then Jonathan and I, like, we were thinking, Jonathan's like, you know, Josh could. So we came up with this idea where basically he needed her, when he needed her, she would come out, she was the assistant. So we thought, we need to find a way that I could be his assistant, but be a guy.
Right.
So what we came up with is I was going to be this, like, idiot stagehand, and then I would fill the same role. Like, when he needed someone to bring on stuff or to do it, I would come out. So we got me, like, these really thick glasses. I had, like, this big headset. I wore all black, and so I'd come out and like, so then we, like, created this character. Like, I never spoke to the audience, but I'd whisper to him, and then the rest of the time I was just kind of like, dumb. And so then it turned out to be a lot of fun. And for Jonathan, who had been doing his act for years, he loved to mix things up. He liked to, so he said, Josh, just stay with the show for a while. So I ended up staying with the show. So, and the city of Las Vegas asked me to be the artist in residence.
What?
Yeah. So I became the artist in residence for city of Las Vegas. So this is what my day was like. I would wake up. At noon, I would go to Circus. I'd perform till about 4 o'clock, and I'd do, like, a bunch of shows. From there, I'd go and I'd teach for the city for, like, an hour. I would teach, like, underprivileged youths and, like, orphans and stuff. It was really sad. Sorry to, like, breeze through that. But, okay, here's an apple, go. So I worked with the kids, and I taught them, like, comedy and stuff like that. Then I would go teach for the second city. Then I would go do the 8 o'clock show at the Flamingo. Then I'd take the back streets and go over to the Aladdin and do Jonathan's 10:30 show. Then, after his show, we would go to his warehouse and we would write more comedy and come up with more bits and come up with more tricks and stuff like that.
Oh my gosh.
So, like, the best education.
So, with all this going on, how did you transition to Cirque? Is that what came next?
I made another good friend.
Okay.
He was a young comic. He did this act called The Quiddlers over at La Femme. So my buddy Christian, who's like one of my closest friends to this day. So he and I were just like these young, dumb guys having fun in Vegas, and like we'd hang out every night, and I'd pass out at his house and wake up like at 3 a.m, and he'd have like mannequins facing me, and I'd like, duh! He did it. It was crazy. He got an old director he worked with was working with the director of this show for Cirque du Soleil, and they were trying to find clowns. Now, I have to say, in the world of clowning, which is very small and unknown, there is this clown named David Shiner, and he's really super funny. He doesn't wear any makeup. Him and, you may know Bill Irwin. Bill Irwin and David Shiner had this show called Full Moon. And it was like a big Broadway hit. Bill Irwin even got the MacArthur Genius Grant, like, to create shows. I mean, these guys are like amazingly brilliant. He's Mr. Noodle on Sesame Street. So David Shiner was like my hero. Like, I would watch footage of him back when you had to have it on a VHS. I would watch that tape of him like 1,000,000 times. So much. I loved him. Well, he was directing a show for Cirque. And so I was like, I gotta get on that show. Well, my buddy Christian got on the show. Like, he knew the director who was helping David find talent. And the original idea for this Cirque show, from what I heard, was they wanted to have, it was going to be like a cast of all clowns. It was going to be all comedy. Cirque's first all comedy show. Well, David saw hundreds and hundreds of clowns around the world. And by clowns, I mean physical comedians, you know? He saw hundreds of them, and he wasn't finding what he wanted. He had found 2 guys so far. This guy named Gordon White, who's amazing, and then my buddy Christian. So then he's like, okay, I got 2 of you, and I wanted like 30. So then he says to Christian one day, the director, David Shiner, my hero, said to Christian, I wish I could find, like, I need a funny clown who's a really good improviser. Like, that's what I need. And so Christian's like, and Christian was that. He was both of those. And he said, I know the other guy in America who's a funny clown and has circus experience and is also a professional improviser on a show in Vegas. Like, I know the guy. And so he's like, what? And so I ended up auditioning, and we hit it off, and I ended up in the show. So awesome experience to go with like one of my closest friends and to go create a show with my like dream director. I will be the first man. I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
Now, how do you create a show with Cirque?
Oh my gosh. It is a process.
Yeah?
Well, they start working on it for 2 years before they even get us. Then I arrived October 2nd, 2006. One of the only dates I remember in my life. I forget my age a lot. But I remember October 2nd, 2006. Christian and I leave Vegas and we fly to Montreal. We were in Montreal until April when the show opened. So you basically spend all cold winter in their big, amazing studios creating this show. And it is a lot of trial by fire. The hardest part, though, is that was, in my adult life, the longest stretch I went without having an audience. So it did a number on us because here we are trying to write the kind of comedy we wrote. If you ever see Kooza, you'll get the DVD. I'm on it. The type of comedy we did was very interactive. Mm-hmm. So we're writing stuff using audience members and pulling people up, making fun of them without an audience, and so it was really hard.
Yeah. Our
first performance we did for the owner, we had two big acts in the show. We were all over the show. We were the lead characters. But then we also had our two big acts. And the first act is 15 minutes long, and the second act is close to that. So of the 2-hour show, 30 minutes, almost 30 minutes, we're responsible of just pure entertainment. And then we're also involved with everything else. So our first act went well. The second act that night went so poorly.
Oh, no.
The audience was so quiet. When we got backstage, Christian's all, I think I heard someone's Indiglo turn on their watch. Luckily, though, I was working with Christian and Gordon, who, like me, laugh at themselves.
Yeah.
So the first thing we did, we got on stage, we were laughing so hard, we were crying. Our director comes backstage, and he looks at us, and he just starts laughing so hard. David's like, that was horrible, guys. I've never seen something so bad in my life. Now, we're all able to laugh out because, as professionals, we know it's going to be good. We hadn't had an audience forever. We'll tweak this, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't the end of the world. Awesome experience. I'm so glad I had that experience.
How long did you tour with that show?
I was with them 2 years, maybe a little over 2 years, I think, because of the creation and then the touring.
Where did you move on to?
We moved up north for a while.
Okay.
So this was the first break I took from performance. And it turned out to be one of the most important things I could have done.
Really?
And it also became another quiet period for me.
Why was it one of the most important things?
It forced me to solidify all these abstract thoughts I had that I had been having for years. You know what I mean? And but I was going so fast and constantly working, I never stopped to think about those things. And the cool thing was I worked in this little coffee shop and I was a normal person for a while. And then in being a normal person, I realized I'm not normal. And it forced me to look at everything and really take a look without being distracted by shows and performances and stuff like that. And I really needed that time. I hated that time.
Yeah.
But I look back now and I'm glad I had it.
Yeah.
You know, life never makes sense looking forward, but looking back, it always does. And it's it makes perfect sense. And it prepared me for what came next.
What came next?
I invented the first rocket. No. What happened next was I was asked to direct this big show in LA, Cirque Berserk.
Okay.
So Cirque Berserk, contrary to the name, had nothing to do with Cirque du Soleil. They're a circus troupe who is based in LA, and they had been growing every year. And it got to the point where this year they were going to rent a 1,500 seat tent and do this huge big show and close to $1 million budget and stuff like that. And they needed a director, and so I met with them and we really hit it off, and I ended up directing that show. Now, I was lucky that in most of the work I've done, I've worked for other people, but I've got to help generate the material that I did in almost every gig I've done.
Yeah.
But I was still part of somebody else's story. So finally, this was my first chance to really lead a story and tell my story. Now, their show had a story already, but they had pieces of it and stuff. I got to come in, help shape the story, bring it together, and tell it. So that was really great. And then we ended up moving to Los Angeles, and I like hid out for 6 months because I didn't want people to know I was here. And then I decided, like, okay, I'm going to start letting people know I'm out there. And then things started picking up.
You performed on David Letterman.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Okay. So this was on Ringling Brothers.
Okay.
So when we played New York, we had these publicists, and they're like, what do you guys want to do? And a couple of us were like, we want to be on Letterman. And he's like, no way. He's not going to have Ringling Brothers clowns on his show. But we're like, please, we really want to be on Letterman. And because Letterman's like one of my heroes. And so they contacted the team. David thought it would be funny. I'm saying David like that. Dave goes, he calls up. No, we're at breakfast. No, David Letterman, Mr. Letterman. What they did was they did the top 10 clown pickup lines.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so they wrote them, but we got to help. And so it was like, but here's the coolest thing. So we were going to be on the Friday night show. They film, on Thursday, they filmed the Thursday and the Friday show. So they brought us there before all the filmings to like start getting ready and to prep and blah, 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 blah. And so they basically said, like, look, you have security come in and out of this building all day. So here's the difference between me and a lot of the other guys. The guys I was working with, we had a lunch break, and they all left, and they left while they filmed the Thursday night show.
Okay.
But I was like, no, I'm staying and learning. I'll get lunch some other time. I'm going to stay in this building. So from morning till night, I stayed in Letterman's studio, backstage, meeting everybody I could, talking to everybody I could. The guy when Dave throws his pencil through the camera, or through the window, I got to do the crash, because like, I met the Foley guy, and he's like, you want to come down? And like, I was like, this is a golden opportunity, and I'm going to learn. And so I learned from it, and I watched him. I got to watch Al Green warm up. I'm a big Al Green fan. So I'm watching, and like, I'm like basically like leaning against like where Paul Shaver's piano is. I'm looking at Paul. Al Green's singing. He's like singing to me. He's singing, because there's no one there, so he's working the room, but no one's there, so then he's singing to us. I was just like, this is awesome. This is awesome. This is so awesome. And I wouldn't have had this opportunity if I would have gone to lunch. Yeah. But I stayed in. And I got to talk with Paul Schaefer, and he's like the nicest guy in the world. Never. I got to sit in Dave's chair and like put my legs up on his desk and take a photo. It was just a great opportunity.
What are you doing now?
Right now I'm talking with a couple big companies, like 3 big companies right now, about doing projects for them. Now, I know, in the world of entertainment, that means nothing.
Right.
Everybody's always talking to somebody that will never come to fruition. But the difference between everybody else and me is I actually make these things happen.
Yeah.
So one of these will happen.
Yeah.
It's deciding which is best for myself. And now, because I'm going to be getting married and I share my life with somebody, we have to decide what's good for the both of us.
Looking through the course of your career, what has been your favorite project?
My career. I mean, it's such a cheesy thing to say, but every project I've approached, I treat it like we're going to change the world. If you're an artist, you should be doing that. Art should change the world. Art is a fortune teller. Yeah. There was a great quote, I can't remember who said it, but they basically said, like, if you want to see the future, look to the art. Because it's true. Art always tells us what's coming. Yeah. Elvis Presley shaking his hips, parents are going nuts, I can't believe this. Now it's that... He showed us the future, and now that's like so commonplace. Right. Rock and roll was the devil's music. Now it's the background music to like car commercials. Like Rolling Stones is like Chrysler or something. I feel like I'm part of a heritage, and I feel like I might not accomplish something amazing in my lifetime. Amazing in the sense that like, hey, he was like Charlie Chaplin or whatever. But it's my job to protect the knowledge. And to pass it on, because the next guy might come along and he might be the next Chaplin, and he needs those tools from me. So I take that very seriously, and and it drives me nuts when I talk to artists and they have no sense of history. You are an artist, and you should be apprenticing yourself to the masters. Stand on their shoulders. It's your job to take the art to the next place, not to stall it for your lifetime. Push it forward. One of the best things Cirque du Soleil gave me was they gave me permission to call myself an artist, because they refer to all of their performers as artists. Yeah. The artists need this, the artists need that. We need the artist at this time. All artists, you're supposed to be here at 4 o'clock. They beat that into my head that I'm an artist, I'm an artist, I'm an artist. I used to think that was so cheesy. I was the guy who was like, I hated all the artsy-fartsy people. And it's funny, like, I have this, like, duality. I say, in the world of art and performance, I always think of people as either a Keaton or a Chaplin. So Chaplin, he was, of course, the artist, you know, very artful about his work. He approached it like he was writing, you know, a symphony. Buster Keaton, on the other hand, was like a schlub. You know, he was like, well, I could have been digging ditches, but I'm good at falling, so that's what I do. It pays the bills. He's very blue-collar about his work. Both ways are proper ways to be. I think people tend to be more one or the other in art.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of, like, in my head, when I meet someone, I push them in one camp or the other. But it's funny, like, I think overall I'm more Keaton.
Okay.
But the older I get more Chaplin. And also, too, like, I, like, have one foot in each camp. So, like, as soon as I'm with a group of people who start to talk to Chaplin, I go, ugh, and I lean on my Keaton foot. I'm like, this is just a job, guys. But then when I'm with a bunch of Keatons, I go, guys, come on, this is art. This is beautiful. We should be. So, I struggle with that inside myself. To me, everything is spiritual too. Yeah. Everything I do, it is. I don't like to talk about it much. Like, religion, I think, is very personal, stuff like that. But everything I do is grounded in my beliefs, and everything I do, I think the secrets to my success come from that.
It's beautiful. What do you do on a daily basis to stay inspired and to feed your art? I
remember I was reading. Whether or not you believe in the Bible,
right.
I think you should read the Bible. This is a really old book. And I was reading the book of Job, and in there he says, there's nothing new under the sun. And I go, okay, here's a guy thousands of years ago who says there's nothing new. Even back then, he was bored. But I looked at that, and at first glance, it is such a depressing thought to think, oh, there's nothing new. But then I realized, every story has been told. And that can either depress the hell out of you, or it can be one of the most amazing revelations you can have. Pick the story you want to tell and tell it. Yeah. The only thing that changes is the character, the main character, and you influence it and you put your flavor on it and stuff like that. The poor guy in the gutter. Yeah. I've read the story where the poor guy in the gutter remains a pauper all his life and dies alone. I've read the other one where the guy has in his heart the will and the drive, and he ends up the owner of a Fortune 500 company. So when I wake up every day, the thing that keeps me motivated is that reminder. I remind myself, Josh, the story has been told. If you don't like what's happening right now in your life, you know the steps to change it. To me, a big sign of intelligence in a person is their ability not to make excuses. I find unintelligent people make a lot of excuses. Yeah. And so they will hold their lives back. Even though we all know in our heart of hearts, that same voice that when we don't want to do something, we know, right? That same voice is telling us what we should be doing. And if you look in your heart and you're honest with yourself, most people are honest with themselves, especially in Los Angeles. You know, I can't be going for Brad Pitt roles, but I can go for his goofy sidekick and I'll have a great life. Right. There's a lot of guys like me going for Brad Pitt roles and they're miserable in LA because they're not honest with themselves. Be honest with yourself and you'll know what to do. You'll know how to accomplish what you want to accomplish. And then the other thing, you gotta work. Nobody in this town likes to work. They want their burrito in 30 seconds out of the microwave. Everybody wants the quick fix and that doesn't happen. People come to my classes. I teach here in town regularly. I have classes going now. And I'm fortunate right now that I have this little group of people who realizes that you have to just do and learn and practice and practice and practice. But I'll do things where I'll do like a weekend seminar or whatever, workshop thing, and people kind of expect to leave the weekend with my 10 years of experience, or my 10,000 shows or whatever. And it's like, no. It's not like that. I get hired to help fix shows. I get hired to help fix acts. I work with circus acts that are like aerialists and stuff. Obviously, I don't do aerial work, but I get hired to work with them because for me, it's like kind of like when Neo saw The Matrix and he finally realized and he just sees numbers falling. Like I could look now and I see an act and I see it now for the whole that it is, and I go like, oh, this is what's missing. This you need to do this, and then you need this, and boom, it'll be perfect. And like, and that's just from all the experience I had, all the experience. I love teaching, and I love directing, and I love when I help a cast look amazing, and I help an act look amazing, and they feel good. That makes me feel great. I love that. Like, there's no better feeling than that.
Now, is there a bit of advice that someone has given you in the past that has stayed with you?
One of the things I think a lot about lately, and this kind of came later in my career, it came from David Shiner. He told me two things that like really stick with me. One, he told us, and he just hammered it in our heads, the act is merely the excuse to showcase the talent. That phrase changed my life. I worked recently with a Cirque act, okay? This girl, she's gorgeous, she's on the silk, she's amazing, she's doing all these tricks. She showed me her act, it's all set to music, it's choreographed, one thing after another, boom, 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 she's doing all these tricks. She finishes and she says, what would you change about it? And I said, I would take out some of your tricks and I would just look at the audience. Because she was doing all these amazing things, but what she hadn't learned yet, and what most people forget is, we want to have that connection, you know? Like, we want to have the eye contact. We want to connect with that performer.
Right.
If I've connected with her, if I've made eye contact with her, if I know her, then I'm with her, struggling. And when she hits that triumphant pose, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
But if she's just doing trick after trick after trick, and it's just a display of skill, there's no connection to that. Mm-hmm. And it's cool, too, that, like, that's the role of the clown in the circus, by the way. The clown is supposed to represent the audience. So the clown on the floor comes out, after these guys, these superhumans have done these amazing tricks, the clown comes out and goes, oh, jeez. And that's the audience saying, like, I can't do that. And the clown says, it's okay. I can't either. And I'm you in the ring looking up at this amazing thing. Or the clown will try to do the trick and eat it. And the audience goes, okay, I'm not alone. And they all laugh. It's cathartic.
Now that there isn't, a clown college to go to, if a young person wanted to go into clowning or wanted to go into physical comedy, like, what would you recommend for them to do?
I sell a set of DVDs. No, I wish. I would say you got to work. You got to get off your ass and study. So you need to learn, what did the guys do before there was a clown college? Because there was only a clown college for 30 years. Okay. But before that, how did they learn? And so you learn by doing. You learn by being on stage. I would say, get involved and perform anywhere. Early in your career, say yes to everything. Because what you're saying yes to is saying yes to getting on stage. Your first greatest teacher will be the audience. Yeah. And they're going to tell you so much about yourself you didn't know. Yeah. They're going to tell you, we don't buy you doing those characters. Right. We like when you do this. Yeah. You got to say yes, and you got to get up and you got to perform. And don't limit yourself to just, like, if you're in college and you're going, also do other shows, also do stuff outside of school. Be tired. It's okay to go 4 years without sleep. Yeah. These are the years to do it, because when you're older, you're not going to be able to do that. Do it.
If you could go back in time, would you change anything?
No.
Awesome.
No, absolutely not. And because I don't know what's coming, but this all makes sense. Yeah. This is all leading to something. Because everything has been perfect so far. Even on my darkest days when I didn't have a job and I didn't know what to do and I'm worried, but I always know, like, I just know it's going to make sense. This is part of something bigger. This is part of something bigger than me. To me, it's not having faith. Yeah. Having faith is when you doubt something and you hope that it's true. Yeah. To me, the things I believe, the crazy things I believe, my spiritual beliefs, my religious beliefs, my beliefs about performance, to me, they're all as factual as the sky is blue or as the wind blows. I would never change a thing.
Beautiful. Thank you, Josh, so much for coming in and speaking to me today. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
Such a amazing stories, right? If you've got questions for any of the artists that I interview, feel free to leave them in the comment box and I'll make sure to pass them along. Okay, so next week I am interviewing Paul Hungerford. He's involved in commercial casting out here in Los Angeles. He's also a producer of the Fudio Horror channel on YouTube. He's also got a couple of cool stories about, you know, working with Steven Spielberg. Whatever. I'll see you next time.